I'm Dan Adams, live in Oklahoma City, where the frantic search for survivors of this morning's blast continues. Full details coming up.
I'm Dana Howard, live at the federal building in Sacramento, where workers are still reeling from today's bombing, but we also have a touching story of a survivor.
I'm Alan Frio.
And I'm Jennifer Smith in for Beth Ruyak. We have complete coverage of the terror in Oklahoma. Plus, the man accused in a deadly hit and run is found, but the victim's parents are not satisfied.
From KXTV 10, this is News 10 at 11.
I guess we pulled 6 dead babies out and a couple of dead women. And it's just the most devastating.
Everything fell on top of
the most devastating thing I've ever seen in my life.
What a scene it was. A rescue worker describes the carnage after bomb explodes just outside the Oklahoma City Federal Building. The apparent terrorist attack striking America's heartland and also at America's hearts as well. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Terror is just one emotion Americans are feeling tonight. Confusion and anger are others in the wake of this deadly bombing.
And as night fell on Oklahoma City, the reality sets in on just what a horrible day this has been. The first picture showed the extent of the damage to the downtown Federal Building. A third of the structure sheared off, offices left gaping open.
Now, people were running everywhere, as you see, the injured and those trying to help. Soon, the horrible realization that most of the dead were children dropped off at a daycare just inside the Federal Building.
And as darkness descended, the rescue operation continued. Late this evening, some payoff as 2 people were found still alive.
They say they found someone in there who was definitely alive. They wanted a couple of other ambulances because they had 2 or possibly 3 more people. They were not as certain about their condition as to whether they were living, but they called for the ambulances anyway. This ambulance just arrived on the scene down there. Hopefully, a small bit of good news out of this disaster.
But that small bit of good news did not last long. Unfortunately, the latest reports indicate those 2 people have since died. However, there is still hope that others will be found alive.
And unfortunately, the very latest casualty figures are grim, too. The death toll has now hit 31 people. At least 18 of those are children. At last check, 300 people are still not accounted for. Many could be dead. Others may not have reported themselves to authorities. Let's hope that is the case. And the search continues for suspects. 2 men described as Middle Eastern in appearance were spotted fleeing the scene in a rental car right after the blast. Supposedly it was a blue GM rental car. We're just getting word that 6 groups, all Muslim, are claiming responsibility for that attack. Officials stress that they still do not know if any of the calls are genuine. Now, here is basically a computer-generated animation of how the blast happened. A pickup truck full of explosives detonated right in front of the building.
And then right after the disaster, we dispatched News 10 crews to the scene. Our Dan Adams will continue our live team coverage now from Oklahoma City. Dan?
Well, Jennifer, it's after 1 o'clock in the morning here, and certainly the rescue efforts are even intensifying at this time of the morning. In fact, crews are arriving now from Arizona and California to aid in the search for some of the victims that are still trapped inside. And we have late word now that a 15-year-old girl was just pulled from the rubble here. She is in critical condition, but she is alive. Let's go ahead and switch to a live report, or rather a live picture now, a close-up picture of the building that is behind me here, as I tell you that the scene that we see is very similar to what we saw in Los Angeles last year during the earthquake there. However, one big difference. Some of the buildings that we saw in Southern California that pancake like this were only 2 or 3 stories. This is a multi-story building, and the devastation is complete. Let's get a late report now from reporter Vince Patton, who has been on the scene since this morning.
Panic broke a second time, just as everyone thought the smoke had cleared. Police had found what they believed was a second bomb in the Federal Building, forcing everyone, including rescuers and medics, to get out of the area for nearly 2 hours.
Oh boy, it was the dangest explosion I ever seen, about 9 o'clock.
Survivors told a story of flying glass, crashing ceilings, and pandemonium.
There was a boom and the building shook and the ceiling fell in and the walls fell in and there was nothing left.
The scene was grim enough until they found the children.
We pulled out 6 little guys, 2 women, 2 gals. You know, there were still 3. There's still more people in there.
Rescue efforts were slow. Floors had collapsed upon floors. Searchers faced their own dangers, and hundreds remained unaccounted for.
We got people trapped. We're doing a systematic search of the buildings. Absolutely. Yeah.
Meanwhile, federal investigators are pursuing leads on just who might be responsible. They found car parts blocks away that might have belonged to the vehicle holding the bomb. That and one other unanswerable question remains. Why?
And a very big question tonight that might not be known for some time. Reporter Vince Patton reporting the latest from the blast site here. A couple of stories with regards to rescues tonight, some of them very tragic. A woman who was trapped in the basement here apparently was rescued. She is alive. However, paramedics had to amputate her legs with only minor anesthesia to get her out of the building. Furthermore, we just received word now that 60 military recruits who are here this morning receiving their oaths to join the service apparently are among those that are missing tonight. Of course, the search here will continue throughout the night and throughout the day tomorrow. In fact, rescuers say it could last several days. And of course, the investigation into why this might have happened will last more than days, perhaps weeks, even months. That's the latest live now from Oklahoma City. Jennifer Allen, back to you.
You know, Dan, we both covered the Northridge quake, and you are absolutely right. It brought back memories of the Northridge quake back in January of last year. And
yeah, the other thing too, Alan, is that when we had to park several blocks away and hike in here, where we parked several blocks away, windows are blown out there, doors are blown out there, so the impact of this blast was incredible. In fact, a radio report that we heard driving over here today said that some people 50 miles away heard this blast this morning.
Yeah, and unfortunately a much more sinister source, and we'll be hearing these awful personal tragedies in the hours and days to come as they continue to find victims. Thank you, Dan.
And just an incredible force on that bomb. By the way, President Clinton has now ordered massive federal assistance to Oklahoma City. He called the attack an act of cowardice and evil, and he could barely contain his anger at a news conference this afternoon.
Let there be no room for doubt. We will find the people who did this. When we do, justice will be swift, certain, and severe.